Hi guys. Wow, welcome to 2024. Chairman Mo. I'm still qualified to talk money, to talk investments. That's what's up. Yeah, look, I think this is one of those long overdue episodes. It's the 5th of Jan, and this morning I wake up and a friend asks me, Doug, what's your opinion on the Reserve Bank moves last year, all the interest rates increases, what do you think is gonna happen to people's houses? You name it. And I'm like, yo, dog, we just arrived. Like we just got here. We just got back um to the year, to work, to all of that sort of stuff. But I'm like, look, big picture, here's my opinion. So the first thing is that I've got a book that I bought that arrived in Jan this year, the Great Depression Diaries by Benjamin Roth. Yeah, basically my green screen is not allowing me to show it. But basically, yeah, if I find, let me try one last time. If I find a place where it can show the Tlaposada, this is fun for me, not for you guys having to watch all of this. Yeah, but basically it's Benjamin Roth, The Great Depression, a diary. Oh, would you look at that, right? The book looks like that. And the idea of me buying this book, I bought it late November last year, but because whatever happens at the border, or at the borders and shipping stuff and what, it only arrived in Jan this year, last week, yesterday or the day before yesterday. Yeah, I went to collect it yesterday. And the idea was, I don't think we have anything that has ever prepared us for a Great Depression like they had in 1929. I don't know. Look, I've got a few requests for the afterlife where I essentially will ask all the questions I have. But my inclination is that, look, it's still possible for something like 1929 to happen and come through again. And for me, the least I can do is that if there's information available that can prepare me for that, I want to take it in. But what makes this book fascinating is that Benjamin Roth was a lawyer around that time. So you know that it's someone that was quite awake when it comes to looking at the space and opportunities available. And on a day by day basis for like 10 years, he just kept on writing what is happening, what impact has happened in the environment, what observations he has made, that sort of a thing. And we arrived today, basically almost 100 years later, and something similar is happening. I don't know. I'm not a woo-woo person. I can't tell the future. I make money on the stock market. I don't make money from fortune telling. I can't predict which company is gonna be the best, which one can't, what are those sort of things. All I do is I make good investments, right? And so I thought, let me read this book. I'm still busy with it. And the idea is so that I can see what things to look out for. Then you guys can call me smart for looking out for all that stuff. So that's pretty much the answer that I gave Tumelo Mphirima. We're going to be speaking shortly. That look, I don't know anything in particular, but one thing I can say is that I feel like we're in the consequences phase of life and of the economy and of things. We had an opportunity to work on whatever we needed to work on before 2019. 2019 came, and we're pretty much in a good mood, but still somewhat stagnant as a country, especially if you look at the stock market. Then 2020 happened, there was COVID. So that overtook everything. And I think for the last 3 years, COVID has pretty much taken center stage. And now we find ourselves in a position where we are in 2024. And what we were supposed to do in 2020, we postponed in 2021. We reacted to 2020, 2022, we reacted to 2021 and 2022. 2023 last year, I think for the first time, we really felt the squeeze. Interest rates kept going up. And we thought, Flip, when is this ever going to end? And I think this past December, was the first in which the actual happenings had come to an end and the consequences were kicking in. Those of you that were disciplined, paid this, paid that off, you'll find that you probably are going to do better than most of us. Those of us that last minute spend 5,000, 10,000, 100,000, you name it, I think we're going to find that there was one bad decision too far. But in the consequence stage, as I said, I'm not trying to predict. That's just the conversation that I was having with Tumelo. And yeah, as far as we got, I think I appreciated it. Tumelo's response started blowing my mind away. Statistics, psychology, psychiatry, you name it. You know, he's in marketing. And so it basically just started firing boom, boom, boom. I'm gonna let him in. He's gonna have a conversation with me now, and you guys can just enjoy his brain. Hopefully I can participate at the level that he's engaged. But yes, you are a gent, eh? Yeah. Yes, Tumelo, basically. Tumelo, my brother.
Hey,
How are you doing, my man? Sharp, sharp.
I'm good. Good, thanks.
Sure, man. I think, let's see. I'm gonna take off.
I don't look that bad.
Don't mind,
This of January. I look that bad for the 5th of Jan. Let me see. Is my network cheeking?
Let's see. I don't know if it's yours, mine, or both ours. Let me just hide mine. Let's see how that works. If it won't be kind of on the bandwidth. All right, I just paused mine to make sure it doesn't show the bandwidth.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
Let me know if you need me to switch mine as well.
Okay. Hopefully not. Then it just makes it easier that if someone is watching this, then they don't have to be basically watching names on a screen or still pictures. So, yeah. Sure, man. Nice finally meeting you in somewhat person. I want to answer Steve K. Did what eh.
Oh, not even. Just like definitely not an accolades page. This is like, you can see down here, right? This is my sister's stuff. She's like a big fan of Disney. This is like a Star Wars character. Nah.
Okay.
It's not that deep. It's not that deep. It's not that deep.
Oh, ke na le trophy da go dimo da.
Yeah. Hey. It's one of those things that happens when we are children and stuff.
When we are the decoration at home. Anyone that comes in must know Korea. Tumelo teng.
Good. I probably should have put like, there's a bookcase that I'm looking at. I'm like, I should have positioned myself close to that bookcase to elevate. Yeah. So they must know who they are. No, man. This guy Wabala from time to time.
Yeah. But otherwise, man,
but honestly, I'm good. I was just about to say that I don't believe in the obvious signaling that we tend to have in society. I mean, it's all well and good, right? Once you've earned your MBA, it's yours. Once you've earned your doctorate, it's yours. All of these various things we've earned as individuals. But I think we always need to separate ourselves from events in our lives. You know what I mean? When I ask you who's researcher, it can't be researcher CSA SA. You know what I mean? Or CA CSA. That's not who you are, because at birth were you researcher CA CSA. You know what I mean? Did you find an identity as a function of whatever degree you now found? So I always think what comes after I am is a very powerful thing. And it might sound very cliche, but I think it's very important that people think about these things. Say, okay, fine, job is separate from who you are. You know, it's a vocation, and that can change. So does that mean you change who you are from time to time? So, yeah. But I'm good. question. I'm all right, man. I'm all right.
Now I'm gonna
Been a very
yeah.
yeah.
Doesn't that though then because the conversation I've been having got December, ne? Meeting cousins, meeting friends, what have you. And I would raise the question when we talk about the typical Kasi boy, ne? Who we talking about? Because I count myself as a typical Kasi boy. Then you have my younger brother that says, nah, dog, definitely not you. Ken namfana Kasi, so. And then I'll take it to the friends, I'll take it to the other friends, what. And then you literally have 5 variations of someone, all of them saying that they're the typical Kasi person, Kasi boy. And so you end up then with that situation where you then have to ask yourself, Pila Pila, what's the correct label for what, for who? Well, to your point, one
Yeah.
of the things that I wished I could say to him, which I will, in some other platform, was to say, listen, the money world is a game itself, what have you. There's elements of Bokasi that you need to evaluate on the spectrum. Yaore, you decided that, listen, I'm going to go study this for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. You essentially were saying or signaling that, listen, I'm letting go of this and I'm acquiring this. So you shouldn't necessarily fight that hard to emphasize number one, it may never leave you to always be there. But number two, you actually can use it to your benefit if you fully appreciate who you are now and what world you play in now and how and when people can basically interact with that. Because sometimes, whether you like it or not, Joe, if you wear your full on Kasi badges, you either intimidate or you're off putting in some rooms. I'm saying this especially knowing we're in marketing, where people will say they're looking for an authentic township person or the authentic this and that. And you're there like, yes, the real authentic, that thing that you're looking for. You don't hire for that anyway. You're not looking for that. You're looking for me who can be comfortable with you and then occasionally switch it on and off, especially for the most positive aspects that can make you relatable out there to the market. But outside of that, you don't want the whole package.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that's a very interesting. It's a very interesting way for us to start the conversation.
Yeah.
But I like it. Let's get into it. Let's get into it. So I mean, I'll start from the back, then I'll probably work my way back to your initial question, right? In terms
Yeah.
of what is a Kasi profile or Kasi gen profile.
Yeah.
You're right. Corporates hire for conformity, right? It's the
Yeah.
reason why if you went to a boys' school, you are much better off getting into. I mean, you're CA, so you'll understand this a lot better, especially with articles and whatnot, right? There's a huge like boys' club culture when doing articles, whether you're at Deloitte, PwC, or you're from St. John's, or you're from JEPI, or you're from, you know what I mean? There's an in-group, out-group thing that happens when you get into these spaces, and they permeate far beyond like where you started school, where you went to high school, St. John's College, you're able to get into hedge funds and all of these wonderful places. So they hire for conformity, and the reason why is because you want to account for variance, right? You want behavior that you can, to some degree, predict. And how do you predict behavior? You can predict behavior off of people's set of circumstances. You can predict behavior also based off of people's backgrounds. So if I know you went to an elite South African school, I know
Yeah.
that there are certain ways that you carry yourself.
Yeah.
If you went to a specific university, studied a specific subject, I know that part and parcel of your background has a certain demeanor. Now, that's what you're talking about. Now, you're saying corporates then want a little bit of this like authenticness that they sprinkle into brands just so that they can find more relatability in certain instances. But what they're basically looking for is the non-threatening parts of that particular interaction, right? So even the people that they hire are like non-threatening black men. So even if a guy who was Kasi or Tsotsita, whatever the case may be, he's still a non-threatening black guy. Like this guy, you can, he's fine,
Yeah.
man. He can come on set and no one is watching their bag and,
Yeah.
because you're right. If they went for the true Kasi, authentic vibe
Yeah.
that they're looking for, No one's going into the Cape Flats and saying, "Hey, brah, do you want to be on an advert?" No
Yeah.
one's doing that, bro. You know what I mean? No one's doing that because your whole studio might be empty tomorrow. And these I would say biases and heuristics to some degree exist to protect us, right? I
Yeah.
don't get I'm from Township, so that's where I was born, right?
Yeah.
I'm not jealous, even when I'm even like
Yeah.
you know, I'm not jealous because I'm just like, oh, you guys must stop all of these biases. It's like, no. You will get robbed. And there is income disparities, and people have unemployment, and there's problems that people are facing on a day to day basis. And you could be a very quick way for him to put food on the table that night, like Ospan. So coming back to this concept of gassiness, um, a lot of what we do in marketing, specifically around profiling, and I'm so happy that it's evolving as time has gone on, is there's a lot more to your profile than an LSM, right? Which is basically just a standard. It's a measure of your living standard, essentially,
Yeah.
right? And that was like, oh, it's so old and it's so archaic. Basically, what they used to have in that study is, do you have a fridge? Do you have a DVD player? Do you have a TV? That's some of the things that they're measuring in the past. And we know right now that that is basic for almost everybody. Even shacks have DTV, so to speak, right?
Does that
And
because that often touches on inequality, right?
yeah,
And what the rich will try argue is, yeah, the inequality gap has widened, but nobody is extremely poor anymore.
yeah.
So
So
everybody,
your question is,
yeah. I was saying, as you were speaking about LSM and it being an old measure, especially with how they measured it with the fridge, this, that, people don't understand. There was a time when to have a fridge was an economic indicator. It probably still is, but it's not so much than, let's say, 30 years ago, for example.
sure,
Hot water, cell phone, that without a shadow of a doubt. Internet, we now have those sort of indicators
sure.
as part of what would essentially say this is your economic status or your economic level or what have you, right? So with that, I was saying that actually explains why rich people would say income inequality is not a problem or wealth inequality is not as much a problem. What's the main problem is what's everybody's absolute level of poverty or level of standard of living. And what they would argue, especially when arguing for capitalism, is listen, we no longer have the poor that we used to have back in the day. Now everybody, even someone who says they're poor, they basically can afford the following basic necessities, and poverty now is redefined using other measures.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Sure. So I'll come back to this, right? There's an analogy that I like using, but let's finish the cussiness. But I've made a
Yeah.
note of it. Yeah. All right, cool. So when thinking about all of those things, right? LSM and all of these various measures, and we will touch on it and get a little bit deeper into it in terms of how does this link to inequality, and I think it's an interesting segue. So when you think about the various ways that you can exist or the different permutations of a Gussie gent, like you're saying, you and your cousin are different, you and your brother are different. And Gussie, first and foremost, we need to define what that is. It's a location, right? You essentially come from a place that is known as literally a location, right? And that's where the word Gussie is derived from.
Yeah.
But it's basically a peri-urban area that isn't quite suburban. It's not really informal settlement, right? It's just peri-urban. It's like in between those particular structures. There's not an extreme amount of wealth, but also you guys are not in abject poverty for most of the people living in that particular environment. Everyone has like enough is relative, but I'm talking about just for survival. It probably is like those particular places where survival is possible, right? So when we think about that, and we then think about the location and the cussiness, you then become a reflection of the community that you're in. That's the first step. So if you are in Dobsonville versus when you're in Pimville versus when you are in Zola, there are different nuances that you grow up in, because you might grow up in a place that is a lot more suburban in nature, right? So you think about the Pinvilles, you think about the Naturenas, you think about those sort of places, right? And then you come into places that are a little bit more hardcore, the Zolas, the Alexas, you know what I mean? Where it's like you sort of grow up with a much tougher skin exterior, right? That in and of itself was a coping or a survival mechanism within that environment that you grew up in, right? So if you grew up sort of around semi-cheese boys, you adopted semi-cheese boyness, right? If you grew up around semi-thugs, you adopted semi-thugness, right? So that you are able to assimilate to that environment so as to not stick out of a crowd, right? Parents always say things like you need to be unique and you need to be
Dangerous.
yourself and you need to leave and all of these different things. It's very difficult to do that because if my friends are not trying to go in the same path that I'm going in, for me to actively choose to go against the grain is difficult. You know,
Yeah.
kids are equipped with the skills of being trouts, right? Which is fishes that swim upstream. Like they're not equipped with that sort of skill set. So you then are basically conforming to what your location would have deemed as the necessary ways of being in order for you to survive in that particular environment. Okay?
Yeah.
Then there is also sort of a intersectionality around certain things. As you grow up, you start to develop your own interests. You start to interact with different things. So when you're at school, you're no longer if you're fortunate enough, right? And I say fortunate enough, meaning it well and truly. Your parents are able to take you to a school that is in a suburban area, you know, sort of Model C, that has a functional governing body, extramural activities, that sort of thing. That's good, right? It's very, very good. And I'm not going to shy away from it in this particular conversation and say, yeah, mara isang bana ba dikolong tse ko kasi. It's like, no, don't. Hey, if you can afford it, don't do that thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you can afford it, don't do that thing, right?
Yeah.
So when you then come into the structure where you're now interacting with different kids, they're from different socioeconomic classes, right? Some of them are super rich, some of them are sort of okay, but you start to develop friendships. The first thing that happens when you get to school, maybe on the first day of grade 8 or when you're in grade 6 or whatever the case may be, let's talk about high school. Maybe that'll be more prevalent around identity formation, right? First day of grade 8, you're all wearing uniform to start with, right? So there is no class distinction from the uniform. Okay. Toughies get toughies, no one is really saying, oh, look at that Under Armour toughies. Like it's not a thing.
Yeah.
Know? So that's the first thing that comes into bear. A pencil case is a pencil case. Whether you were rich, whether you were poor in my time, we all really liked either Red Mountain or like King's bags. I'm not sure if you remember those, but like yeah. So I
then I remember there was, I think, Kerimo or something like that.
Kermo, yes sir, yes sir, Kermo, Red Mountain, yes sir. So in my time, that's what you were telling your parents to go buy. But you can find those things in town. There's no special boutique in Santon that you need to go to find a kid. You know what I mean? You find it in town, in small street. You go there, you find it, right? So that's where our parents went to go shop for those things. So now you find rich kids like Red Mountains and Kerimos. You find that guys Bakukasi like Red Mountains and Kerimo. So there's immediately not like a social economic distinction that's made just by you arriving. When they say good morning, grade 8, you're like, good morning, ma'am. There's no immediate distinction. Those distinctions come over time, right? With things like CV's Day, you know, with things like that, you start to recognize, hey, the game here is different. After school, when people are getting picked up by their parents and some are walking to the taxi rank, you know what I mean? Those are where those distinctions now start to come in to say, hey, but what happens is the very first impression is on a level playing field, which means how you establish friendships or connections with the people during that day isn't based on class. It's not even based on socioeconomic settings. It's based on interest. It's based on how you're able to carry conversations, based on your level of humor, right? So you start to sort of get ranking within the ecosystem.
You wanna list those things? Just run like off the cuff. Let's say 5. If we can get to 10, even perfect. And the reason I say that is because I had this interesting perspective a few years back where I heard Barre, after school, basically your report card disappears. And the only way we know who's winning in this game of life is through money. And everybody says money is not important, money is this, money is that, but with there not being any other scorecard or report card where we can see, oh, you're getting 80 for maths, 20 for gym class, it becomes difficult to tell which adults are on the right track and which ones are not. So now, as you're saying, I think you hit humor on the head. I think it helped to be able to,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'll term it this, right? We'll list the high school ecosystem scorecard, right? So
Yeah.
we'll call it that. Yeah. So basically, it's where you then rank, how you then rank in that particular environment, right? So humor is a big one, because when you think about what a classroom setting is like, you have various lessons, teachers, and whatever the case may be. You go through a repetitive cycle of the same structure. I receive information, they give information, I'm given a set of tasks, and I do them, right? So what humor does is it allows for you to be the sort of person that understands situational analysis. This is why I love stand-up comedy so much, because stand-up comedians basically allow for us to have an emotional connection with the situation that's around us, you know? So if our economy is bad, or if there's a dictator, something that's probably like catastrophic, they're able to find a very interesting, humorous thread that allows for us to make light of the matter, right? But it's also a processing mechanism to say, this is bad, but I don't want to kill myself in this instance because of how this has been expressed, right? So when you think of level, humor is very important because it allows for you to understand the situation between the teacher, the students, but it also shows you the students that are willing to push the boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because sometimes something that is said might not be favorable in the sense that teachers are looking and they're like, you can't say something like that in my class.
Yeah.
Or they get kicked out, whatever the case may be. So I think humor is a very good one because it puts you up in that sphere as a person that's willing to push boundaries, right?
Yeah.
It's also a defense mechanism. So if you are odd in whatever way, like you have a funny head, or you have an odd smile, or a crooked nose, or things you can't really change about yourself, right? If you are funny, no one is going to dare to point those things out.
Yeah.
Because they know they don't have the ammunition to respond to whatever you will bring in their way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's essentially the first one, would be humor. Then shortly after humor, and these are different in this sense, but are part of the same family, is charisma. Right?
Yeah.
So your ability to have conversations with different types of people. So you're able to connect with the shy guy in class, the shy girl in class, right? But you're also able to talk to the cool kids, or who are deemed as the cool kids, for whatever reason, whatever vanity metric that would exist.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's because their dad has a lot of money, or because they come from some sort of background of being really dope athletes, or whatever the case may be. But coming into that particular space, charisma is that through line that allows you to connect with almost anybody, right?
Yeah.
But also make that almost anybody feel heard, connected with, seen. I had a very good friend. He actually plays in the PSL now. He plays for Polokwane City. Nyakala, right? Rapadi. Fantastic footballer.
Yeah.
And on my first day of grade 6, he approached me, and he was like, "Yo, what's happening? My name is Nike. Where are you from? What's happening? Whatever the case may be." We became friends immediately, right? He was a fantastic athlete, had charisma, had humor. Like on the plane that I'm talking about right now, it was at the very top. And you can see this by the outcome. Becoming a house captain in a popularity contest, he became the house captain at the school, of my house. But on that day, I was assigned a house. I think it was Scott. And he said, "Nah, you're not going there. Let's go to Livingston. You come to my house. Then change it on the register."
Yeah.
I mean, I was just like, "Oh, let's go." So I followed him, right? Like, senselessly. I was just like, "Hey, I'm going to disobey on my first day of school. I'm just going to disobey what the teacher said I must do." And I went to, and they changed it. All my siblings that came to the school after that were in Livingston. You know what I mean? And I thanked him for it because it was a winning house. So you think about all of those things, right? He was also very convincing. So the charisma was also convincing people to do things that they otherwise shouldn't be doing in school. But it also is a telltale sign of leadership. Then I'll do the third one, right? I know you'd ask for 5, but I'll just do in terms of what helps you rank in it. It's a special ability, right? Typically non-academic. You know
This
what I
is
mean?
school. We're still on school, right?
Still school.
Okay. Yeah. Special ability.
School.
Yeah.
Yeah. So special ability. So you're a dope musician, right?
Yeah.
You like you have like the DJ Nyana, you can dance, you
Yeah.
know, you are athletic, right? And typically those are the ones that are recognized the most. I mean, the fact that you are the chess champion in the school doesn't impress a lot of people,
Yeah.
you know, because it's a sport that they don't quite understand, and it's like it feels like it's for nerds, and it's like, you know, in certain settings it might be because maybe you're
Yeah.
going to a specially gifted school. Let's say the school's whole premise is they're specially gifted, but I'm talking about like a normal middle class high school experience. You know,
Yeah.
the kids there are not diplomats' children. There's no Einsteins of IQ.
Yeah.
No, no,
We
no.
are all equal.
We're just normal kids, just normal kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, so special ability. Being athletic is probably the biggest one because it is something we aspire to at that time to align ourselves to different things, right?
All forced,
So sorry?
All forced. January, get the Olympics or this sports day so that we can celebrate your talent.
100%.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now you run faster than us, you jump faster than us, you kick a ball better than us. You know what I mean? You have better stamina. It's bad. Like we just looking at you like, "Hey, okay, sharps."
No.
You know,
Yeah.
whatever. You know, so having a special ability is important, but also because competition is such a good source of pride. Schools, you know, you hear, especially like all boys schools, you hear guys that come from JP talk down to Parktown boys guys because they just like to beat you guys at everything.
Yeah.
You know,
You
see guys that say, "No, I wasn't I wasn't at above. I didn't go to any boys school."
Hey.
I had an interesting high school trajectory. So I went to like a top school in the north, Bryanston High, right? And then I went to sort of a middle tier school in the east, Tower Glen, which is right next to Edenvale High School.
Yeah.
So I got the best of both, like North boys whose dads drive Porsches, and you know there's potential helicopter pads, kung and that sort of thing. And then I also got the other end, going to school with kids.
Potential helicopter pads. Getting potential helicopter pads. Like it could be Mara. Yeah, but it's
it could be there. No. There were still other schools, St. Stephen's around the corner where we knew they were there. Right? Where we knew they were there. Like, no, your dad's working towards that. You know, that's your dad. That's your dad's front man. When he goes to Saints, he's like, yeah, no, these are the guys I'm trying to be like. So and then I went to Dark Lane, which was a mix of Banabako Alex, Banabako Tembisa, you know. So that's where I learned how to be street smart, so to speak. It was in that environment. Phonia via, no, you know what I mean, type thing. And you sort of not sheltered by the naiveties of upper class suburbia. You know what I mean? You realize, people do drugs and they do them at school, and you know it's like lit. So you look at those different, it's lit. So looking at those various elements is what I came from. So I think I'd say charisma, I'd say humor, and I'd also say having a special ability that puts you up in the ecosystem sort of scorecards, right? For high school. But okay, to conclude the thought around gussiness. So when we then think about identity intersectionality and where that we derive our foundational identity from, right? When you and your cousins are having the discussion about who's more gassy than the next, and who isn't a typical gassy guy, and whatever the case may be, it's sort of a misnomer to try and label that. Because first and foremost, by the definition of gassy, it doesn't have an inherent identity. You know? It's something that you assimilate to as a function of which part of the gassy you are coming from. You know? And then the second thing would then be that if one is more gassy than the other, does it mean that we take the positive or the negative elements of gassiness, right? So do we celebrate your closeness or affinity to criminality as a scorecard point, you know? Or do we celebrate your upward mobility in this particular environment as a positive trait? You moved from Zola to Dobsonville. Does that mean you are less or more gassy as a function of that mobility? You know? So I think it's very difficult to have that conversation objectively. I think it's a feeling more than anything else. And that feeling more than anything else is just defined by what you were exposed to. You had an ideal Kasi guy, and you are thinking, how close am I to him?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And our him is different.
Yeah.
So that's what my thought process around that would then look like. Now, you mentioned something about income disparity and LSMs, right?
Yeah.
So the analogy that I mentioned earlier on is, I call it the airplane analogy.
Okay.
Now, you've been in an airplane before?
Yeah, I have.
Yes. Okay, cool. I don't want to make these assumptions, man. Assumptions, man. So you know how when you're in an airplane, the first thing that happens is you take off, right? And you're at ground level. Essentially, you see the airport. And then when you get out of the airport, you see the neighboring areas that you are in. So if you're at Ortambo, you start to see like Kempton Park, Benoni, those surrounding areas as you fly up, right?
Yeah.
And the higher you go up in altitude, everything looks the same, basically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Everything looks the same. So what I say rich people have is like landscape syndrome.
Okay.
You get so high up on an altitude where when you look down, everything looks the same.
Okay.
Right? So the difference between shanties or shacks or informal settlements
It disappears.
Like, Hyde Park sort of areas, it looks, it's just landscape.
Yeah.
The major things that you're seeing are highway lines that divide different towns or whatever the case may be, but it looks the same. Now the lower you come, like when you come into land, then you can start to see actually those are shacks, those are houses, right? Those are schools, those are fields, those are farms, right? As you are descending, and then you get back onto ground level. So the problem is a lot of rich people don't go to ground level enough.
Yeah.
So for them, when they then look at what abject poverty looks like, it's like, no, but 30 years ago, people had pit toilets. Now they have indoor plumbing, right? And it's like, well, if you consider all the other things, which is inflation, the cost of living, and everything else, they're just literally on an equal plane with that particular reality. It's just the infrastructure. But when you consider where you are relative to the 30 years, right, and your kids and that generational structure, and you then compare it, right? If you were looking at it pound for pound, as they'd say in boxing, it's exactly the same. It's like they haven't moved significantly more.
Because, and I think you see it a lot more with the middle class than you would see it with the poor, where to be middle class now is a lot more painful than it was 30 years ago. Because 30 years ago, if you had your fridge, your black and white TV, sofa, rings, you knew that this is it. I've made it. I'm a man of the house. Today, if you have all of those things, you still taking. You still worried or hey, what if we get paid Kadi 16th of December and not Kadi 25th of December? What am I gonna eat ka January?
Yes, sir.
Interest rates
so you're right.
up, and then you basically are uncomfortable. And I think that's where we probably started / ended this afternoon, where we're saying now that starts to have an effect. And what type of effect do we then see on people? With the interest rates that happened last year, you essentially had people that were paying 6,000, I think was the example we used, and now they're paying double that on their property. And the reality is, last year when all of this was starting, nobody had 6,000 rand to spare. So you're wondering, okay,
imagine having to find another 6,000.
Another house, basically.
Yeah. Now you have to pay another house. You're like, oh, it's hectic. And it's not that when you are paying the 6,000, it means that your bond repayment is going to be in a shorter period of time. No, you're just keeping up.
Yeah.
You're just keeping up so that they don't take your house.
It's still interest.
Yeah, so they don't. So they don't come take your house. The bank doesn't say, "Hey, my guy, I had it, dog. You tried, bro.
Hey.
You tried. You know what I mean? Hey, good attempt. But yeah, as for now, don't get into, and then we're going to financially exclude you in the form of blacklisting, right? You have to make these things right.
what does that look like? Where do financially excluded people go? Because we have the hierarchy of poor, middle class, rich.
And financially
You've
excluded.
been financially excluded from middle class. Do you go back to begin? Is it snakes and ladders? You go back to block number 6, block number 8, or what is it? Are you still even in this game? Because from an economic perspective, we saying that you beyond poor because you couldn't afford where you were alive. But from a lifestyle perspective, poor people are not gonna say, okay, you are now our new rich. When you become economically excluded, where do you go?
This is a very interesting question. One I've never thought of. Like, I've never thought of this question. Ever, 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 ever. All right, cool. Let's define the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you've done a very good job of highlighting. But okay, fine, middle class is rich, right? And then there's degrees in between those two, right?
Yeah.
So there's there's like upper poor, and then there's like lower middle class, middle class, and there's upper middle class, and then there's lower rich, and then like upper rich, and then that sort of thing. So when you think about where the spectrum is, then financially excluded, if you had to think about a diagram, is you have this linear scale, and then you're playing outside of this linear scale, right? Yeah. But you drop, I think, parallel to where you were, because you don't immediately lose all the other things that come into it. You don't lose your house, and then you don't have a car. Let's say you paid your car off a while, right? Yeah. You still have your job that allows for you to be able to pay for the necessities month in. You might have just moved back home, right? Okay. So I think you're still parallel to your particular, but because the social mobility is that movement from being absolutely poor going all the way through to being like, Bill Gates, right? Yeah. So that's what social mobility is. So on the social mobility plane, because that's a continuum, because you can always get rich.
Elon Musk.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Bill Gates is middle class now.
Okay, Elon Musk. Hey. Right. I see we have 2 minutes left. Do we have a plan for that?
I think when it cuts, we'll just jump off, and then I think it makes you wait 10 minutes, and then we'll jump on again. You can't set a subscription. Then like social mobility.
All right, cool. Because social mobility is a continuum, right? It's like it goes up to infinite on that end, but it also goes up to infinite on this end, right? Until you're dead, like you can be as poor, you can be poorer than poor, right? So it goes to infinity on that end, it goes to infinity on that end, right? Yeah. So what happens is you now come out of the game on that continuum, right? But you're still a participant because you have to pay taxes, right? Yeah. You still have to make sure that whatever other amenities in whatever jurisdiction or republic you're in, you are still participating in the form of being economically active. So you're financially excluded but economically active. So I think that's what keeps you parallel to where you are in your particular social class, right? Yeah. But I think what difference would then be in terms of the outlook or how you are perceived within that particular class is basically how you are still able to be adjacent to those participating, because those are your friends, those are your family, those are all of those various things, right? Yeah. So I think definition-wise, you're not participating in terms of you have the flexibility to make certain financial commitments, right? Yeah. But in terms of your actual lifestyle, you are not at the end, unless Vele it came with like the whole Jenga thing where if all the bricks came tumbling down. Let's just assume it's one element that keeps you financially excluded. You're still able to be like technically bankrupt, but participate in the economy, right? So yeah, I think that's how I define it for now. I think we'll unpack it a little bit more because I think it needs refining in terms of that thinking.
All right. Now